kitchen. We're going to take mulberries. We're going to turn them into mulberry jam. Now what I have here is basically 1 gallon of berries when it was frozen. These are all from my own tree. We're going to go ahead and start the process of making a nice, good homemade jam. The first thing you need is a good sized pot. Second thing you need is a cup of water just to start it off with. Turn it on to a medium high so that it'll get going real good. And add your berries. These were all previously frozen from my tree. And they make quite a mess out of a bag. The next thing we'll need is an appropriate sized lid. You want to keep a lid on it at this point. And then it's just a little bit of a waiting game. That is what a gallon of mulberries looks like in a pot. Bring to a good boil, something like this. And let them cook down for a little while. At this point, you kind of judge how far you want to cook them down. It's not an exact science on this. You just want to let them cook down. Make sure you keep them covered as much as possible. This is what they look like after they've cooked for a while. These are ready for the next step. Now, if you want, you can just mash them at this point, or you can do what I'm going to do. Since mulberries have stems, I don't really like the texture of the stems in my jam. I put them through a blender. Alright, because of the stems, I like to blend it. Also provides an extra thing here for me is I'll actually be able to get a good exact measurement because most blenders are graduated. That'll allow me to know how much sugar, how much lemon juice or lime juice, and how much pectin to add. Give that a little bit of a blend. Blend until good and smooth, and that's going to give me just a little bit under 5 cups, so I'm going to add a little bit more. Blend it a little. I'm going to go ahead and bring it all the way up to 6. Alright, it only leaves me a little tiny bit left. So remember, I started off with a gallon and now I'm down to 6 cups. So cooking it cooks it down quite a bit. just a hair over 6 cups. That's where you need a second pot. Transfer the blended to a second pot. I took care of pretty much all the stems, and it made it relatively the same throughout the whole thing. And you just bring this back up to heat. Put your cover on it.
See how it stains.
Don't sit things down. You get this. Now for my recipe, it requires basically 2 cups of sugar and 2 cups of honey per every 4 cups worth of puree here. So we're going to go ahead and start adding the sugar. Since I have 6 cups of berries, we're going to do 3 cups of sugar. Now you got to make sure you stir it in real well. Make sure it completely dissolves. Alright, now that ladle happens to be 1 cup. And that is honey from my own hives. Look at that stuff. So 3 ladles of honey. Stuff like molasses. It's very tasty. Stir it in real good. And you're basically going to be waiting until it comes to a rolling boil. Now, alright, now it calls for 2 tablespoons of lemon juice per 4 cups. So these are ice cubes made from lemons from my own tree, and they're basically a tablespoon a piece, just a little shy, so it's close enough. Okay, so the next thing you need to do is add your pectin and make sure that it's stirred in really well. It's 3 tablespoons per quart. You've got 1.5 quarts, so we're going to go ahead and err on the safe side and add 5 tablespoons. Now, stir it in really well and make sure it dissolves. This has to be hot. It's real close to boil, a rolling boil now. The next step is very, very important. Bring it back to a rolling boil. And let it boil for a few minutes like this. You'll want to stir it while it's boiling like this, but it should continue to boil while you're stirring it. Can't stress the importance of making sure that it is at a full rolling boil. This is what I mean. When you're stirring it, it should continue boiling. This is what you're looking for. This is what it looks like when you're ready to turn the heat off. You can tell it's thickened. There's foam along the edges. And it is at a total full rolling boil that will stay that way when you're stirring it. Okay, so let it cool down a little bit, but it's still warm. Tends to be drippy, so you want things as close as possible. Now I'm doing half pints because that's a good size for me. You want to make sure you set your headspace. In this case, I tend to set it right around where this lip is. Or as close to it as I can get. Just work your way around. Now, something you got to make sure you do, and it's very, very important. Make sure that this top edge is 100% clean. Just go around it with a wet paper towel. Not have anything on there at all. Then go back real quick with a dry one to make sure you get any moisture. Make sure your lids are sterile. If you'd like to know how to sterilize these, go check out Rebel Canners. She has a video on exactly how to sterilize your lids. When you tighten, you just bring it to finger tight. Don't crank down on it. Just work your way through them all until you're out of this. Then you move on to the next step. Alright, now for the water bath part, any large pot will do. This just happens to be an old pressure canner. I'm not going to pressure can it, I'm just going to water bath it. You need a good lid. You need a jar grabber. When you fill it full of water, use hot water so that you don't have thermal shock, because these are still warm. Use your jar grabber to put them in. make sure that they are covered. Generally speaking, you want about an inch, but I don't quite have that much space. But make sure they're completely covered over. Once it's at a boil, start your timer. You want it in boiling hot water for 10 to 15 minutes for a half a pint. After 10 to 15 minutes at boil, and I err on the side of the 15, go ahead and turn it off and let it start cooling down. You don't want to let it cool down to room temperature, but you do want to bring it down to more manageable temperatures. After they've sat and cooled down good, and the center has popped down, you go ahead and wipe off the top. I have hard water, so it leaves a residue. And at that time, you go ahead and you give the top just a little bit of extra twist to tighten it down the rest of the way. Not much, just a little tiny bit. Now, once it's cooled down for a little bit, get your jar grabber and go ahead and pull them out. Pro tip, put down a towel. This helps, one, keep everything nice and clean, and two, it protects against thermal shock. You don't want to shock your jars. Oh, you hear that pop? That's one that just sealed. That's the next thing you're looking for, is for the center to go down. It'll make a pop when it does. This jar grabber is fantastic for keeping you from burning yourself. Now, this particular mulberry jam recipe is about half the sugar of a normal one, so it's not as sweet as what most people are going to be used to. This is good for people that happen to have sugar problems. If you want it sweeter, double the amount of sugar. Now, the next thing you need to do, without pushing down on anything, is just suck up any water that's on it with a towel. And that's it. You just wait until you hear that pop, and whenever you hear pop, that means it's sealed. Now this is what the final product is going to look like. Now, it's only been one day, and that jar is half gone. The kids have been on it. We'll make sure it's gone as soon as possible. Apparently she really likes her butter on it. That's all good.
What do you mean? That's a thin layer.
No. Like I said, half the jar is already gone. But this is what you end up with after all is said and done. It's got a great consistency for spreading. And the flavor is over the top good. Not as sweet as store-bought. But really, really good. There you go. That's what everything looks like when it's done.